Until a few months ago, I had no idea that I grew up just minutes away from the house in Fayette County, Georgia, where Chris Benoit took the life of his wife Nancy and his 7-year-old son in June of 2007. And before I tell you the story of this infamous murder-suicide, I wanted to kind of set the stage and explain what was going on in Chris Benoit's mind. In the early 2000s, their relationship was on the rocks, and in the span of just a few months, his best friend, Eddie Guerrero, died in his hotel room. Eddie was discovered by his nephew, Chavo, who remarked he still had a toothbrush in his hands. He died of a massive heart attack. Next, Victor Blackcat Marr died of a massive heart attack, which ended another very close friendship. And finally, Johnny Grunge Durham passed away only minutes away from Chris Benoit's home in Peachtree City, which is where I actually grew up. He was 39 years old, and he'd stopped wrestling and gotten obese and died of a combination of sleep apnea and a heart blockage. But the thing about that is that grunge would help Nancy and Chris when their relationship was on the rocks, and it was getting particularly turbulent because Chris had gone off of his steroids, and that actually causes pretty horrible mood swings. And within a couple months, all of these guys were out of Chris Benoit's life.
Eddie was that kind of friend to me, and not only then, but after the shows, it'd be 1 a.m, and we'd be sat in the car till 3 a.m, talking about life, talking about things and issues and problems and everything. We talked about everything, and we never left each other without telling each other that we loved each other.
I feel so sad for these guys, because as much as their profession demands a macho attitude, they're really just theater kids who like lifting weights. And he began journaling, and he wrote that he would be with his friend Eddie very soon, very ominously. And at some point in late June 2007, Chris Benoit began the murders of his wife and son, and they were almost certainly killed several days apart based on the state of the bodies when the police found them. And most investigators say that Nancy was killed first on the second-floor bedroom, and her body was moved, probably at night when his son wouldn't see it, to the garage. After that, a couple days had passed, and he took the life of his son by giving him a cocktail of sleeping pills and then smothering him in his sleep. He probably never knew what was going on and thought that his mom in all likelihood was on the road. And in the intermediate period, it seems like Chris Benoit was calling several friends and family. He called Chavo, who was the nephew of his best friend Eddie Guerrero, and said that he missed the flight to Texas because he had a private match. Well, Chavo called him back and remarked that it seemed unusual. Chris ended the call by uncharacteristically and very forcefully saying, "I love you." No, I love you. Basically trying to impress something on Chavo. And then when another associate called him, he said, well, Nancy is sick and only getting sicker, and now she's vomiting blood. It almost seemed like he was trying to create an alibi. And we don't know if his son was dead at the time he sent this message, but from 3:50 to 4 a.m. that morning, he sent out 5 text messages, the first 2 from his phone, and the final 3 from his wife's phone. The first one said, "My physical address is 130 Green Meadow Lane, Fayetteville, Georgia." The second one was, "The dogs are in the enclosed pool area, side garage door open." The third, fourth, and fifth ones were just repeating his address sent from his wife Nancy's phone. And after this, basically the police were called when he didn't show up at his final wrestling match, and because, of course, Chris Benoit had 6 pretty wild German shepherds, the police requested his neighbor go and knock on the door, and he actually discovered the crime scene, and Chris Benoit had killed himself on the exercise equipment in the basement. And it was revealed years later by, I believe, Nancy's sister that he had Googled the quickest way to snap a neck. And before I leave, I would like to show you the grave of Mr. Wonderful. He's buried just a couple minutes away from Chris Benoit's house, and he was shown in a documentary put out by the WWE in 2004, just a couple years before Chris Benoit committed this infamous act. And in the video, it shows that this man, Mr. Wonderful, was friends with Chris Benoit, and it's called Hard Knocks. It is literally celebrating the pain these guys put themselves through. And because Chris Benoit, the School of Hard Knocks, was really just applauding all of the brutality that was demanded of these men, the WWE did a pretty good job at suppressing it. But it showed Mr. Wonderful literally losing movement in his side. It showed that Chris and Wonderful had a friendship. And Wonderful, thankfully, lived a pretty long and fulfilling life and died in his older years, although still pretty young, all things considered. And I just think it's crazy what society demands of these wrestlers. I feel for them, and I can wish nothing but peace to them and their families.